So what brought me to Indeed was an opportunity to build a world-class software engineering center in Singapore.
I was very excited about being part of this environment where I have a big amount of contribution to growing the site.
Aside from the fact that we're trying to transform the hiring industry, we're trying to also transform someone else's life.
We are introducing transparency to the market, closing the gaps between the job seekers and the employers.
The one thing I really liked about Indeed in terms of culture, it's very open, it's very transparent, the leaders are very close to you. You can even walk up to the leaders and ask them a question.
When I joined, I spent 1 month in onboarding and I was like, wow, this is different. Over here, they make very concentrated efforts to make sure you're part of the team.
People really work to be egoless. They want to make the right decisions. They want those decisions rooted in data and informed by data.
We have pretty good collaboration between product engineering and UX. We all sit together, we are all kind of working closely together in little squads. We are working to really grow the team fast.
The idea of the Gong project is to introduce new hires to Indeed's engineering framework within the first week to give them an experience of how is it like to push code out to production so that they feel that they can make an impact.
We're building product that's going to have global reach, global impact. It's deep tech, it's deep product. We're doing stuff that is fundamental to the Indeed product portfolio.
It does require a certain bit of being able to switch roles if needed or being able to put on multiple hats.
We're also looking at people who have a sense about how to solve problems, to come up with solutions, not to abstract computer science problems, but to fundamental product problems.
You should come to work with Indeed if you like to innovate, if you have great ideas, if you like to learn, if you like to try something new, where you know you have great people who will share your idea and help take that forward with you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today here at Indeed Careers Talk. So today we are having the 7th episode, kinda, for our Indeed Grad in Tech series of webinars. So we have today with us Jake, staff software engineer, who will be talking with us about his experience and what he does in Indeed, and he's currently have been working as a software developer for more than 20 years. He's leading a team currently now to develop software and identify and recommend potential jobs to job seekers. So Jake has worked across quite a number of different industries, and that includes consulting, gambling, finance, tech. So I'll leave it up to him to talk you through more about his experience and also what he's talking about. So over to you, Jake.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, hi everybody, my name is Jake Pizarro. I'm a staff software engineer at Indeed Singapore, and I'm going to talk to you about careers today. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk a bit about how I got to Indeed. This is sort of like, a very quick summary of 20 years of software development career. What Indeed is from an engineering perspective. Right, so it helps you understand what the company does and how it works. Talk about some of the tools we use, talk about what I do and my team does at Indeed. We'll talk about how products get built at Indeed, how work gets done. And we'll talk about some of the challenges that you'll face as an engineer, particularly as an engineer starting out in their career. And we will talk about how Indeed helps you overcome these problems and grow as an engineer. So let's get started. And we'll talk a bit about why Indeed is different to other companies as the last bit. So we'll start with how I got to Indeed. This is quite a long story because I'm fairly old. The interesting bits are typically around changing careers and situations where I wasn't the typical candidate for a job. So we'll focus on those and I'll skip most of the rest of it. So how I got to Indeed. So when I was 12 years old, my parents bought me a state-of-the-art home computer. It was this, except I didn't have a monitor. I just had an old TV set hooked up to it. These were the days when you could buy a magazine that had a game written out in it, and then you could copy that out into your computer and play the game. And it was all in BASIC, because that's what the Commodore supported. So I used this. I was interested in it. I wrote a Gaussian elimination program for a school project when I was about 16. And, you know, I was quite surprised when I turned up to university and found that my first year computing project was exactly the same thing. Anyway, so I actually don't have a computer science degree. I have a mechanical engineering degree. The reason for this is that although I was always interested in computers, when I was going to university in New Zealand in about 1990, there were not a lot of computer science career opportunities. So I did mechanical engineering instead. So my first job was at some big, dirty engineering sites, places like this, and places like this. So like, you know, pulp and paper plants in rural New Zealand, nickel mining in rural Indonesia. This was great fun when I was in my 20s, but I noticed that the people who were like sort of, you know, 10 or 20 years older than me and were still there didn't seem particularly happy. So I sort of took that as an opportunity to look for something else. Mechanical engineering is interesting, but it's very slow moving, and I wanted a more dynamic profession. Some of my university friends were actually starting to do software development jobs. So I had to change career. So this is actually not a trivial exercise, because mechanical engineering and software engineering are not both engineering. There are industry-specific certifications that matter, particularly in mechanical engineering. The skills that you learn for either of them are not really transferable. So I had to find a way to bridge that gap. And that bridge was to go into management consulting for a little while. So the deal is basically that management consulting firm gets to work me very, very hard for very little pay and negligible chance of advancement. And in exchange, I get to learn an entirely new skill set on the job. So this worked quite well. After a couple of years of that, I moved to London in time to see the internet bubble of 2001 burst. I even have stock options in a firm that is still around and still not public. So that was my first experience with RSUs. Now, and after that, I got my first proper software job, or what I considered my first proper software job, at a third-rate gambling company in Gibraltar in Europe. Again, gambling was fun, but it was a pretty chaotic environment, and I really wanted to change to finance, but no one would give me a job because or even really an interview, because I didn't have finance experience. So this is where I discovered the value of side projects. So while I was working at this gambling company, I noticed some common problems with a popular emerging technology, which was Maven 2. The problem was that it was very hard to understand with Maven where a dependency came from. And you often got the wrong version of the dependency, and it was very hard to understand why. So what I did was I wrote a very hacky solution that just allowed you to see this. And on the advice of one of my mentors, I contributed to an open source project just as a hobby in my spare time. This project was called Q4E, or IAM, and it was one of the first Maven Eclipse integrations. The project is now defunct because there was another also project that sat in the same area. But the interesting thing was that no one really had this thing that I built, and that the idea spread quite rapidly. So, a couple of months after we'd released this, then all of our competing OSS projects had the same functionality available. And now it's commonly available in all IDEs. So during the process of doing this, I learned some important things. I learned to collaborate with people that I had never met face to face, never even talked to on the phone. we only used email and message boards and stuff like that to communicate. I also learned that in the open source community, people don't really care whether you succeed or fail. So you have to learn to learn from failure and to keep trying and to listen to advice and to persist until you get it right. So that's an important thing I learned. I also accidentally learned a new skill, which wasn't really the point of doing this project at all. It was just happened to happen. And that skill was I learned how Eclipse RCP worked, which was an OSGI platform that underpinned the Eclipse IDE architecture. This seemed incidental, but then it turned out to be in high demand by one of the big banks in the UK, and I landed a contract right at the start of the financial crisis. So really, the open source let me change career in some ways, or was very, very instrumental in letting me change career. So 12 years later, I'm working at a large international bank in Singapore. I built a successful product, but what I found is that I spent most of my time fighting people who didn't understand software, didn't care if my product failed. These are things like compliance, testing, some of the tech leadership at the company. So one of my friends gave me an essay by a guy called Steve Yegi. And here's an essay, quite a reasonably well-known essay, or at the time it was, called Get That Job at Google. So I read the essay, and then I decided that I wanted to work in tech. So what I did, I bought some books. I read the books. I made notes. I practiced a lot online, solving problems. And like by a lot, I mean probably like 9 to 12 months of pretty regular online problem solving. And while I was doing this, all the while I was doing this, I interviewed at tech companies, even when I didn't want the job, because I knew that their interviewing process was different and I had to get used to it. So by the time I actually got to interview at Indeed 2 years ago, I was well prepared, and I managed to land a staffed software engineer role, which is where I am today. So that's it for how I got to Indeed. Now let's talk a bit about what Indeed is. So what does Indeed do? Most importantly, it connects employers and job seekers together. So how does it do this? So employers obviously want to post jobs. Now they have lots and lots of ways of doing this, right? They can post directly on Indeed. They can post on job boards, which Indeed then pulls the information from the job boards. They can post on their own websites. They can post into their own internal systems, and some of these big companies are hooked up to Indeed. They can Indeed scrape some websites as well to get jobs. So there's many, many ways that employers can post jobs on Indeed, right? And what in this process of getting all of these posted jobs together, removing the duplicates, checking them for fraud, illegal content, this is all called aggregation. So just to be clear, this box is not one application. It's probably hundreds of applications in this case. I've drawn it as one box because if I drew hundreds of boxes, no one would ever understand the diagram, especially not the amount of time that we have. So what happens after aggregation? So we take all of these jobs, cleaned up jobs, and we build some really big Lucene indexes containing all of our live jobs. So that's basically 3 months worth of jobs. So there's like probably about 3 big indexes, I think North America, APAC, and Europe, and Africa. And I think probably the biggest one's about 65 gig, and they get rebuilt every 45 minutes and pushed out to our data centers all around the world. So what this allows is that in these global data centers sit our front-end software. Now, this is what you probably think of Indeed. If you've ever looked at Indeed's website, you'll be looking at this, right? And this is what job seekers look at, and this is how they interact with Indeed, and lets them find jobs. So, hey presto, job seekers can find jobs. Now, this is not enough, right? Job seekers need to apply to jobs, right? So what Indeed does to do this is it collects these jobs, sends them back to our main data center in Austin. And from there, it basically sends the job application back to the employer through whatever means the employer specified. So this is all good. How does Indeed make money about this from this? So it makes money in a similar way to Google does by allowing employers to sponsor jobs. So what sponsorship does is it increases visibility of the job and it grants access to some other services. We'll talk about some examples of those later. Right, but this is really only the tip of the iceberg. And I say that each of these boxes is several hundred applications, right? But in order for Indeed to really work, to be successful, it has to do more than just this. So what it does is all of these actions create log information. So these huge petabytes of logs at Indeed. It's down to which job seeker clicked which link on which job at which time, right? You know, who logged in, you know, which employer posted a job, when, where. There's so much logging information. It's enormous. So Indeed stores this in HDFS and allows other applications to use it. So I will talk about, now there's many other applications that use this, and there's no way we can talk about all of these. I will just talk about the application that I work on. So the application that I work on uses data from these logs to work out which other jobs a given job seeker might like to apply to. So we take the log data, we work this out, we send an email to the job seeker, and if the job seeker likes the job, and some of them do, then they will go click the link in the email, go to the website, apply, and the cycle begins again. Right, so that's a very high level picture of what Indeed does in one particular application of what the logs are used for. There's many, as I said, there's many more. So what tools do we use in order to do this? So these are the main languages that we use. There are other languages, but these are probably the key ones. We use lots of Kubernetes for in-house hosting. We use AWS for some stuff. We use a lot of Hadoop-based technologies, so HDFS, Spark, Pig, Hive, these things. We've got some in-house solutions that work on these as well. So Lucene is actually a very key technology for Indeed because it's what enables search to be possible. So Lucene is an inverted index. We use a lot of different technologies for global distribution. Some of them are standard, some of them are in-house, like we have one called RAD, that's a BitTorrent-based solution. We have a bunch of stuff for metrics. Some of them are external, like Datadog. Some of them are internal, like LogRepo, which is the software we use, the systems we use to process all the logs. And then there's something called IQL, which is like an analysis tool, which is a way of presenting the data that these things gather so people can find out what's happening. We use databases, we use Linux, we use Docker, right? So it's a pretty standard tool set. A lot of it's open source. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about what I do and what my team does. So I'm a tech lead in a project that matches job seekers to jobs. This works in Germany and the Netherlands. And we've been running this in these markets for about a year now. So my product is one of the benefits of sponsorship, right? So only if you sponsor your job, will we send out invites on your behalf, right? So my team grew this product in 1 year from a proof of concept, which is basically nothing, to 3% of the sponsored jobs in these markets, right? So that's fairly decent rate of growth. So what do I do during the day? I write code, I do analysis. So we're always doing analysis. We're trying to work out whether things are good or bad, looking for market opportunities. I do a little bit of data science, but we have a full-time data scientist in my team for anything complicated. I also spend time doing software design with the team, leading discussions, making the team work better. I spend a lot of time helping developers grow and learn. So there's a lot of ways in which we do this. We use documentation, we use code reviews a lot. We use discussion. So rather than just simply making decisions and then going on with it, we talk about the decisions in the team. So the general idea is that the team understands and everybody knows, and it's an opportunity for people to learn and ask questions. We use one-to-one mentoring, and my favorite method of helping people grow and learn was going to the coffee shop with them. But this obviously doesn't happen right now. I also spend quite a lot of time doing interviews, because all of the interviewers for our process are actual working engineers. So let's talk about how we actually build a product at Indeed. So the first thing to note is that products at Indeed are grown, not built. Now, what I mean by this is that we don't have an idea in our head of what the end goal looks like, right? So some companies, you'll start with, here's the end goal, and there's 400 steps to get to it, right? We kind of go, well, we know we've got this thing that kind of works and it's small, right? And we've got some ideas about how we can make it better. So what we do is we experiment. So we take these ideas, we apply them to our project, we keep the good ones, we throw away the bad ones, and then we try more ideas. And after you've done this for a year or 2 years, you'll find that your product is actually considerably larger than it was. So we don't have, there's no final fixed goal, right? The goal is always a product of experimentation, what works and what doesn't work. So how we tell good ideas from bad ideas is we use data. So this is one of the really core principles at Indeed. In fact, as many of our ideas as possible come from data. Right, but so what we do is we collect as much data as we can, right? So as I said before, we're always collecting data about user activity. We're running A/B testing a lot, and we're using this data to work out whether a particular idea is good and we should keep it, or a particular idea is bad. So an example of an idea that was good, we thought, hey, let's make the search radius in which we show people jobs for bigger, right? So previously we were just using a city or a town. So we added 20 kilometers to the radius of that. And that worked really well. Got more people to send emails to, more people clicked the emails, more people applied to jobs. It was successful. An example of an unsuccessful feature is we tried to put survey links into one of our emails that we sent out. What we found is that suddenly there was a dramatic drop in the number of people who opened our email. And this is because for some reason, Gmail is not letting them see that email. So this was a bad idea, and we had to go back and rethink that. Right. So this experimentation is just a constant process of going through, iterating over ideas. So in general, on a project, we'll see maybe 6 months in advance in the future fairly well. We'll have a good idea what we want to do in the next 6 months on a given project. Maybe we'd know what we're going to do for 12 months, but not usually more than that. But the interesting thing is that for successful projects, they get worked on for years, right? So, every 6 months you get another 6 months of view into the future, right? So successful projects last a long time in a company like Indeed. Some of them are 10 or 12 years old. Right, let's talk about how work gets done. So how do we actually do stuff? And the most important thing here is that everything Indeed does is done in a team. Sometimes you work in other groups of people, like a guild or a working group, but you almost never work alone. Who is in a team? So a team in Indeed there'll be engineers, obviously, probably between 2 and 5 maybe engineers, depending on the size of the team. There'll be a product person. So the product person is the person who's sort of always thinking about experiments and talking to other people inside Indeed about other collaborations we can do, other products we can leverage. They're really about finding opportunities for the engineering team to exploit. And then there's a TDM who's a manager. So they'll do all the people management work. They'll do the level ups. They'll do the quarterly reviews, all that kind of thing. And they'll have, depending on the experience level in the team, they'll also contribute some technical opinions to the team. So how teams make decisions in Indeed is a bit different to many companies. Indeed delegates authority as far down as possible. All right, so what will happen is that if in a team, if you can make a decision just with the people sitting next to you, if you're just making a decision about your product, it doesn't have major knock-on effects for other people, then you can literally just make the decision with your team, go on and do it. That's as simple as that. If it doesn't work, well, you fix it, or you come up with a better decision, or you reverse that decision, right? But you're responsible as a team. If you need to make a decision that affects another team, then obviously you're expected to talk to that team. But once those two teams agree, that's it. You go ahead, you do it. Again, if it doesn't work, you talk to that team again and you change it. If in the rare case you need to make a decision that affects the whole company, or you need to do something that you want other people to onboard onto, like you've got a new service, you want other people to use it, then there's a design review process that goes out for the whole company for this, right? So, but that's sort of unusual. Like most of the decisions you'd make would be within your team. So most teams are agile to some extent, right? So this means that they're breaking work into small pieces, they're doing the work, they're testing it, and then they're putting that work into production, and then they're starting the next small piece of work. This is very, very important to Indeed. There's different ways of doing this, right? There's different methodologies and all that sort of stuff, but ultimately what matters is that you break the work down into small chunks, and you do a small chunk and you put it in and you test it and you get data and you work on the next chunk, right? The specifics of this are up to the team, but the point is that you don't work for 3 months and then put it into production. That's considered very bad. There's a lot of emphasis on working with other teams. So often you'll need to do something with another piece of software. So in Indeed, you can see their code. You can see everybody's code. All code is visible inside the company by default. So you can talk to another team. Maybe they'll say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that right now. And they go and do it. But more likely they'll say, yeah, that's probably a good idea, but we can do it in 9 months' time. So what you can do is you can go and check out the code, make the change, test it, get it reviewed by the team, get them to help you test it and get it released, right? And this is a way of unblocking your work, right? So the expectation is that teams cooperate in this, and this is pretty much true. Teams will let you contribute things. They'll often want you to do things in a slightly different way because they know the system better than you frequently, but the general expectation is if you want to contribute to another team's code base, ultimately they'll let you. So the challenges that you'll face. So this is particularly the challenges that you'll face as a new engineer, right? So you're starting your career as a software engineer. You're going to have to learn on the job. What you've learned at university is a small amount of what actually you need to know to be an effective software engineer. You're going to need to learn new technologies. You're going to need to learn tools. You're going to need to learn about the systems that run inside the company. You're going to need to learn which people you can ask about which questions. You need to learn how to do certain things, right? Because all companies have a different way of doing things, like testing things or releasing things in production and that kind of thing, right? So you're going to do a lot of learning on the job, right? This is a critical part of becoming a successful engineer. So this is a challenge that everyone faces. There's no nice big repository of curated, accurate documentation. This just doesn't exist. It's never existed in any company I've ever worked in, just to make the point. So you can ask your team. They usually know a lot of things. We use Slack, which is searchable. So you can search for things in Slack that other people have said. You can search the wiki. You can search the source code. You can search Google. But a lot of what you're going to do is find information. And being good at that is really, really, really important. So another challenge young engineers often face is planning their work. You need to be able to complete things, right? So you can't drop things or forget things. You need to be able to manage the level of distraction that you get from around you. Because projects are often quite noisy. There's a lot going on. You know, you need to be able to manage that and still deliver what you're supposed to deliver. Working in teams. As I said, everything gets done in teams, so you have to know how to work as part of a team. And this is quite a specific skill set, and people who don't master this often don't succeed. So this is things like paying attention to what's going on around you. Right? It's asking good questions. It's listening to people. It's persuading people, and it's being able to express yourself clearly enough to do all of these things. Right? So learning these skills is really, really, really important. You need to be productive over long periods. Right? So, you know, you often need to work on a project for a project needs to be worked on for 10 years. You know, you might be working on it for 2 or 3 years. You know, you need to be productive. And the problem is that the longer projects live, the bigger they get, the more complex they get, the harder it is to understand them, and the slower it potentially is to go on them. Now, there's things you can do about this, right? You can pay attention to the design, you can use tests, you can use things like test-driven development, right? But you need to actually use these things, you need to do these things, you need to make an active effort to do them in order to stay productive. So some projects are going to last a very long time. I would expect that you would expect to work on a project for 1 or 2 years for the most part. There is opportunities to move to other projects after you've been on for a certain amount of time, but you know, I would expect that you're moving, you know, maybe every couple of years to a different project, and most of the time. You need to learn to use the tools effectively. So IDEs this is critical for product developer productivity. And IDEs are extremely powerful these days, and most people don't know how to use them. It's stuff as simple as knowing how to use refactorings and knowing how to use key bindings and that kind of thing. So these things are incredibly important to learn. Frameworks, there's lots of frameworks, internal frameworks, external frameworks, things like Spring, various other ones, different coding techniques. Right? These are like sort of, you know, pair programming or mob programming or test-driven development, these kind of things. You know, you need to learn how to use your critical communication tools like Slack. There's lots of internal tools that Indeed uses to do things like, you know, manage builds, run schedule jobs, you know, run services. There's lots of external tools you need to use as well, so open source tools. So you need to learn to use all of these things effectively. So there's a lot of stuff to learn, right? But Indeed understands this, and this is what Indeed does a lot of things to help you succeed with these things. So the first is that there's 2 main technical career paths, right? The first one is new college grad, software developer 1, software developer 2, software developer 3, tier 4, right? So tier 4 is like, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but it's not a people manager role, right? It's a technical leader role. The second career path is college grad, SWE1, SWE2 through C. Then you can become a TDM or a people manager, right? So you can manage people, you'll have technical input as well. The further up that path you go, the less technical input you tend to have, right? But these are the 2 paths that are generally available to engineers. So Indeed has something called Indeed University. We put all our new grads on it, lasts a few weeks, and you learn sort of like to do some basic stuff with Indeed's infrastructure. You'll generally finish your university by doing a project of some kind, sort of like coming up with an idea, planning it out, doing all the work, and putting it into production. So, you know, once you come out of Indeed University, you've actually done something sort of simple, but you've done something that's real. It's out there in production. You'll be in a team, and your TDM, your team manager, is your primary mentor and career coach, right? So it's one of their big responsibilities is to help you identify the things that you need to learn and identify ways that you can learn them in order for you to succeed, right? So that's a very strong part of the team culture. The other is that your team is a very good resource for learning, right? So code reviews are an excellent way to learn. right? Other people will comment, they'll say things like, you know, this is a bug, or if you do this way, then you get these advantages. And, you know, if you do this, you'll get this advantage, and you need to do this thing that you haven't done, right? So there's a huge amount of learning, both about techniques and about the software systems that you work on that come from code reviews. Design sessions are also a great way of learning. Teams will talk about design, talk about different options, talk about the pros and cons. You can read the design reviews that go out for the whole company. They're public, easily available, right? So you can see and ask questions and participate in these processes. You can help in your team planning, right? Come up with ideas. You know, everyone's opinion counts here, right? And the last one is mentors. So from my experience, mentors have really helped me in my career. Mentors can be organic, right? You work with someone, you know them, so another means you just talk about work a lot and you find them very helpful. That's a mentoring relationship, right? Sometimes this doesn't happen, right? And Indeed has a program that it uses to pair people who want mentors with mentors, right? So mentoring is a big part of Indeed's culture, right? It's strongly incentivized. You know, L2s are supposed to mentor L1s, L3s are supposed to mentor L2s, etc., etc., etc. And if you're a mentor and the person you're mentoring gets leveled up, that's credit for you. So there's a strong incentive here. So let's talk a little bit about why Indeed is different. So this delegated responsibility thing is quite different. There's a lot of companies out there. So this is even tech companies that don't delegate responsibility. Decisions will be made in the head office, pushed down. Even if you have an idea, you've got to get it approved by head office. Indeed isn't like that, right? We've described the sort of the bottom-up way of making decisions, and Indeed's very, very big on that. There's not really a head office in Indeed. I mean, Indeed certainly has a biggest office, which was our first engineering office, which is in Austin, Texas, right? But it's not like all the important stuff happens in Austin, right? Say, for example, we've got quite a big office in Tokyo, and there's some core functionality like job search and ranking that gets run out of the Tokyo office. So it's not like the big office and lots of little satellites. It's like the company really is distributed. Mentoring culture, as I said before, other companies, this tends to be informal only, right? Indeed tries to encourage this using incentives, and it provides ways to find mentors if you want them. Innovation. Indeed likes new ideas and tries to make it as easy as possible for people with good ideas to actually go and work on them and be rewarded for that. A lot of companies don't do this. A lot of companies, like, you can have a great idea, but unless you can persuade someone 8 levels in the management hierarchy above you that it is a good idea, then you won't be able to work on it, right? Because everything's top down. So Indeed has a number of mechanisms for making this work. So twice a year, we run hackathons, which is like 3 days where you can work on literally anything you want by yourself or in groups. There's innovation rotations, right? So you can go and work on something for 1 to 3 months. If you can persuade the people that it's a good idea. There's an incubator process. So if you've got an idea that you think might become a product, then you can go to the incubator process. You know, you can present your case, and if they think it's good, you'll get funding. You can build a small team with that, go back, get more funding when you've got more data, right? And, you know, you can build a fully fledged product through this, right? Some successful Indeed projects have come from hackathons, innovation rotations, and the incubator process, right? So this is a real thing within Indeed. Non-product work. So not everything you do has to be working on your team's goal, right? There's lots of other things that make the company better, and the company recognizes this, right? So fixing common problems, like evangelizing products and technology, different techniques, you know, teaching people different things. These are all things that don't relate directly to your product, and the company does value these things, and you can have time to do these things if you have things you want to do. individual power and responsibility. So this is, if you see something wrong, you can fix it, right? If you can persuade people it's important, either they can fix it or you can go and fix it yourself, right? Just do it. In many companies, this is impossible. You can't see source code. Even if you can see source code, the teams won't let you ever commit to it. You know, often you won't be allowed to do this by your manager because they'll want you to keep working on what they want you to work on, right? So Indeed has a different culture, right? It's, you know, if you don't like something, don't complain, fix it. So this tier 4 pathway is also quite different in Indeed. I mean, it's not a big consideration for you just starting out, but the fact that there is an individual contribution. So in many companies, once you get to sort of like a SWE3, sort of like a VP in banks or that kind of thing, then you can't progress any further without without becoming a manager, right? So you've got to take on reviews and all the people management stuff that goes with it, right? But Indeed, there is another path, right? It's a difficult path because the standards are set very, very high, but it exists. Whereas in many, many companies, it doesn't actually exist. Right, so that is a bit about why Indeed is different. Now, I think that's the end of my presentation, and we can go to question time.
Thank you very much, Jake, for sharing with us your inspirational life story. So I'm looking at the question, and you know, not nobody has asked anything yet. But in the meantime, maybe you guys are typing away. You know, I'll just talk a little bit more about Indeed as well. So particularly if you all have not met me yet, I'm a university recruiter with Indeed. So basically, I actually do you know, outreach events and hiring for graduates like yourself, our intern and graduate roles. So we are hiring next year for 2021, 2 software developers, 1 software developer intern, and 1 UX designer intern. So if you're interested in those roles, feel free to go to this website and take a look and let me know if you have anything that you know that might be of interest to you or you would like to, you know, talk to me about it. But at the same time, you know, just wanted to also give a little bit of call out to my event, our last Grad in Tech event next Monday, which is the Women in Tech Dialogue session, navigating the engineering world. So if you're interested to hear more about what you know, our female Indeedians have to talk about, you know, in terms of how they're working within a sort of like a male dominated industry itself, and what is it like for them, and why are they, you know, still in it, you know, despite having been working for a few years and more than that. And also feel free to join us, and also, you know, to spread the words to your friends as well. All right, so I have 2 questions here, one from Daniel. Jake, is a very interesting question for yourself. Why do you choose to be a software engineer with Indeed?
So there's lots of different reasons. And these reasons would be different for different people. But for me, these reasons were the top-down delegation thing was a really, really big, important reason, because a lot of the companies that I worked in before were very, the companies I worked in before were very top-down, and Indeed is very bottom-up. And I really appreciate the autonomy that I get in Indeed to make decisions. It makes my job much, much more interesting. And the second reason is that is the tier 4 career path. So as I said, in other companies, I'd have to become a people manager in order to continue progressing my career. And I didn't really want to do that. And so Indeed offers me an opportunity to progress my career without having to do that. So those were the 2 big reasons for me. The other one is that, and they've got some other reasons. I quite like the company culture. It's nice. It's actually genuinely nice. And the work is interesting. The other question is, what does TF stand for? It stands for Tech Fellow. So this is sort of, it's really just you're like a tech lead, really. right? So your experience, you are expected to be able to help people make good decisions. You expect to be able to work across multiple teams and help and coach people and help people have good results technically. If that doesn't answer the question, then just put another question in. So
Yeah.
next question. Does
Yeah.
working in Indeed provide a healthy work-life balance? Yes, it does. So the culture is that it is do the work that you need to do in a reasonable amount of time. Most of the work we do is not heavily deadline driven. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, it's because we're working on experimentation and we're working on products. There's not hard deadlines. And the hard deadlines are the things that create extremely long working hours. Right. And so what the result of this is that your work-life balance is quite good. Right. So you can go to work, you get a lot of, Indeed gives you a lot of flexibility. You get a laptop, you can work from home. At the moment, everyone's working from home, right? A lot of the companies now becoming remote first. So, there's a lot of flexibility, and this contributes to a good work-life balance. My experience is that it's very good. You don't tend to get called late at night. And specifically when you write software, you are encouraged to write software that doesn't need you to get called in the middle of the night. Indeed does have site reliability engineers who do the on-call stuff, but generally what will happen is that they'll work sort of in different offices around the world, and they will work during their day and then hand over to someone else on the next day, and they will generally do the something's fallen over, what do I do, how do I fix it thing, right? So if you do your job well, then you don't have to get called in the middle of the night.
Yep. Just to add on a little bit about what Jake said, we do have quite I would say, a very healthy work-life balance. And the company culture is definitely very encouraging. If you have seen our Inside Indeed social media channels and the stuff that we have shared on our official channels, right? You have known that we do have unlimited PTO, which is really just allowing Indeedians to take time off as and when they like to, and as many as they want to. So it's really based on how your KPIs are like, and whether you are able to sort of like deliver what you need to, and get them done within a set amount of time that you are looking at yourself. So generally speaking, the managers don't really go down to the micro management level where they in 9 to 5 you have to work on this thing, tomorrow they work on that, and blah 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 and things like that. So you just have to kind of like it's really more of a balance between what you're trying to do, and how much time you want to take off. But generally speaking, there's no restrictions to how the amount of time that you want to take off, as long as you deliver your things. And on the other hand, there's a lot of like other benefits, like work from home stipends that we've been getting for the past few months, ever since we started working from home in March. So we have gotten some money to actually help us set up our home office, and tables and chairs and stuff that you want to buy. And this chair I'm sitting on, I can't really see it now, but it's bought with that money as well. So it's really helped with how we're trying to be comfortable working from home and all. And I hope that answers your question, Daniel. So we have another question from Barnett.
Okay.
Yep.
So specifically for your team, how many members are there and how is it structured? So my team specifically, we have one product person, we've got a TDM, and we've got 4 engineers in my team. So myself, another L3, an L2, and an L1. Right. So, but as I said, teams can vary in size a lot.
Yep. So each and every team, right, Barnett, if you realize in the previous sessions that you have attended, we do have different kind of a mixed match of engineers and data scientists and product managers and engineering managers itself. So really depends on what the project and the team is looking for. So it may vary, anywhere between 5 to 7, and the structure will really depend on what they are looking at to solve within in this list of problems that we're looking at. So hope that answers your questions. For Daniel, have NUS computer engineering or computer science students done internship attachment with Indeed before? We have a compulsory 6 weeks, 6 month or 20-week industrial attachment program. Yes, they have done internships with us before, but not the 6 months one. We have a summer internship that we are actually holding at the moment. So we don't have the 6 months internship positions open at the moment. Reason being that we really have not done it before. So if you all have realized in the past 2 years, Indeed started coming up more in the local market, and only recently you have seen probably myself at the events in NUS as well. So we hopefully just started our graduate program barely 2 years ago. So the 6 month program might take a little bit longer to come to fruition. But we will see how that goes, and it is definitely a possibility in time to come, but not in 2021 for now. All right. So no more questions. I'm also looking at a bit more. Oh, Barnett, here you go. Right, I think this is for Jake.
Okay, so you mentioned practices such as TDD earlier. What about some other practices implemented in Indeed? How does Indeed think about implementing these practices? So again, this is very, very individual. It's down to the team, right? I mean, sometimes it's even down to the engineer, right? If you want to use test-driven development, you can use it. It doesn't affect anyone else. You just go, right? Other things about like, whether you want to use Kanban or Scrum or which agile methodology or how you want to plan your work. Generally, these things are decided by the team. So some teams will do Scrum, some teams will do Kanban, some teams do different things. Yeah. Some things, so the company does provide, it's not like you get a complete choice for everything, right? You can't simply decide to use AWS, right? Because for most things, you're expected to use a specific tool set, right? So for building and deploying your application, you use a skeleton that the company has produced. And that skeleton includes a deployment path into our Kubernetes cluster, for example, right? So that kind of thing, yes, you are expected to use those, but for many other things, particularly for practices, for development practices, you've got a lot of freedom to choose. Does that answer the question?
I hope that does. Yes. That's good.
Excellent.
Awesome. So while you guys are still frantically typing answers away before we end the webinar, so I just wanted to let you guys know that after the webinar ends, right, there is a survey that you'll be directed to. So please do me a favor. Please go on and fill up the survey, because we are looking for you to give us feedback and understand better how we can actually improve all these events, and in the future maybe we could create more better events for you, and also come out with new events that might be of interest to you as well. And for those who fill up the survey, there is a incentive. So we are going to do a raffle to give out some prizes if you're one of the lucky winners. So I hope that's incentive enough to give you a push to actually do all these surveys and help us do a better job in doing all these webinars. So Daniel asks, how does Indeed help people get jobs? Weren't you listening? Yeah. Jake.
Okay, which one do you want me to ask? I kind of think we have covered how Indeed helps people get jobs.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, Jake did mention about how we went forward to design several tools to close the gap between employers and job seekers itself. But if you haven't heard that part, or maybe you join later on, we will be sending out a recording of this video to everyone who joined the webinar as well. So don't worry too much about that. But Jake did talk about it. No worries, no worries. I saw that. So we do have like a small part at the start where we talk about how we actually close the gap between employers and job seekers itself. So once I send it out, and then you'll be able to review that part as well. Okay. So I'll leave your questions up to there. For Barnett, given your software engineering experience, how do you think the landscape has changed, and does it change how junior Swiss should develop their career? Jake.
So how's it changed since I started software development, I guess? So the tools change, but the ideas and the principles don't actually change that much. I think the biggest thing that's changed is that when I started out, most projects were waterfall, right? So they're like, you've got an 18-month plan with this grand vision at the end, and you break it all down into bits and do the little bits and track your time. They're tracked like a physical engineering project, and that's sort of in many ways become fallen out of favor because it just generally doesn't work. So generally, what's the big change that I've seen is people tend to do smaller things, push them out, make sure that works, and then keep building on top of that. I mean, obviously the tools have changed. Like, when I was 12, I learned BASIC, which I don't think anyone uses anymore. But that stuff's relatively easy to keep up with, to be honest. So does it change how junior software engineers should develop their careers? Weirdly enough, not. I mean, the principles that software development works on are pretty much the same. The other thing is scaling has become more important as the technologies developed, right? But that's something that will become immediately obvious as soon as you start working. How do you develop your careers? A lot of it is soft skills. My advice: learn to work in teams, learn to work well with people, learn to ask good questions, learn to listen. Right? These are actually more important than knowing Java, to be honest. I can teach someone Java. That's easy. I can't teach someone to listen. Right? So my advice is a lot of the teamwork and soft skills stuff is really, really critical. But yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, a lot of the software engineering principles were in the last new one was like the 60s or something like that. So that stuff hasn't changed a lot.
Yeah, I would agree, Jake. So, you should always keep an open mind and be open to learning, because a lot of times, I've seen a lot of students where they know the technical skills, they know how to code very well, they know how to program, but when something goes wrong, they kind of mess up a little, and things don't go as desired. So the only issue there was that they weren't open to listening to others' advice and following what was working for the others and trying to apply that on their own work itself. So the key is really to just be open and learn from others and be humble.
Oh, there's one more thing you should add to this: expect to make mistakes.
Yeah,
Don't
that's right.
hope not to make mistakes. Expect them, because you're going to make them. And if you
Yep.
can expect them and handle them, then that's a very, very valuable thing.
I agree. So I hope that answers your question. Daryl, you have you have a question for what's the best advice for students aspiring to be SWE interns in Indeed in the near future? Well, from our end, like what Jake mentioned earlier, we are definitely looking at technical competency, of course. But of course, the other thing is also we are looking at your attitude as well. Because ultimately, we do want you to have a lot of a lot of competency in terms of your hard skills. But when the soft skills kind of fail in that sense, communication is very important indeed to get work done as well. So we're looking forward for someone who is like a team player, to be able to listen to others and really not expect to be I would say 100% perfect at work, but just to be able to learn from our mistakes, and from there we can all move on together. Jake, anything to add from there?
No, I think it's a good answer.
Okay, awesome. So, Daniel, last question. So, has COVID-19 affected or caused any difference in the way you work? How did Indeed, or how does it tackle the challenges brought about by the coronavirus pandemic? So, this is a very interesting question. It for Indeed itself, when COVID-19 happened, right, it was a very interesting time. But our senior leadership team, whom we call the SLT, managed it quite well because we were able to make use of our mission statement, which is we help people get jobs, and it became even more important in our sense, when COVID-19 happened. So working from home did not actually change anything. The only difference was that the platform we were actually working on, and it didn't really affect anything. The only thing that I really miss, that is that the interaction between people with like Jake and the other colleagues in office, and having drinks and fun together in office, and really trying to have that human interaction, which I guess all of us as humans need. So aside from that, the pandemic actually made our mission statement even more stronger and even more meaningful, because it is a very crucial time where a lot of people lost jobs due to the economy. A lot of people has been retrenched. A lot of people were in trouble with their businesses because there weren't enough revenue coming in, and they have to close down and all. So we worked on a lot of things to actually help employers to actually get either more people to apply for their jobs, or to help direct traffic to certain areas, or to help people to find jobs even easier. So if you go onto our website, we have a few series of videos and help tools on our career guides, where we talk about how you can actually help find jobs during the midst of a pandemic. And there's several videos with our senior leadership team about how we are here to help you in certain aspects of your job search itself. So it has quite a lot of different things, and we are trying our best to really make sure that we adhere to our mission statement, which is to help people get jobs. Jake, anything to add?
I can add a bit more to that. So COVID-19 it was interesting suddenly to have everyone going to working from home. So as I said, everything's very, very heavily team-based. And there's a few things that it turns out that you rely quite heavily on in teams. And these are often things like being able to write on a whiteboard together, and being able to have like team meetings, and being able to do things like pair programming, for example. So some of these things have changed. So some of it is that we've developed new techniques, right? So we use Zoom a lot of the time if we want to do pair programming. Some of it's just getting used to the new world, right? So it's sort of like everyone in the team had to get used to using Zoom, right? So at the first, when it first happened, people sort of tended to feel like Zoom was like a chore. It was like a meeting. It wasn't fun, or it was just hard. They thought it was hard work. But after using it for 6 months, it's just push a button and talk now. It's much, much easier. So part of it's getting used to it. And part of it's improvising with the other tools. And yeah, so I think we've worked quite effectively as a team since COVID has happened. We've been able to have team meetings. We can brainstorm. We can do pretty much everything we really need to do in order to do our work, and we can do it remotely now. So, which is quite interesting because it changes the company quite a lot.
Yeah. So when it first started, I think Indeed was one of the first company to actually let employees work from home remotely 100%, every single person, back in March. So it was quite a I would say unexpected move in the tech industry. Because I mean there were remote workers here and there, and there were people who was like working away from office and all, but to allow your whole workforce to actually stay at home and work, that was really something very new, and I'm glad we actually gone to that path, because it really kind of protected all the employees from the risk of the pandemic, having to work outside, and it became positive, and with every risk that we take, there's always a good and bad side of things, and this turned out to be good. So bringing back to earlier what Jake said, don't be afraid to make mistakes because things may go wrong. But then again, there's always a consideration of what if your whole workforce goes down instead, and that will be even more problematic if everyone is working office, and someone gets quarantined and things happens from there. So it worked out in our favor, and and really in the midst of this pandemic, it really makes the whole mission statement even more meaningful, right? So with that note, thank you everyone for joining us today. Once again, what I'd like to remind you, please help me do the survey if you're going to be leaving soon. So that's all for our series for today. We have one more event coming on Monday, the Women in Tech Dialogue, Navigating the Engineering World. So if you're interested to join, please go ahead and join that. The recording for this video will be sent at a later time to every one of you. So if you have any feedback or anything, feel free to write out in the survey. If not, get in touch with me via LinkedIn, via email, and we'll talk to you again soon next week. All right. So bye everyone. Oh wait, there's one more question that came up. Oh, Barnett, thank you for answering our questions. No problem. We hope that was a help for everyone. So see you everyone. Bye.